Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a pretty loud person, so that's kind of one of those side effects of working with children. But I've always been loud, so I'm not sure what exactly what happened along the way. But I've always been a loud person, and so I'll be in and out from the microphone, but I'll do my best. If you can't hear me at any point, just let me know, and I can bump up the volume some. I am so glad to be here with you today. I apologize for coming in on two wheels. I knocked my purse over and didn't realize that my keys were knocked out of my purse until I went to go into my car. So it was an exciting morning already. How many of you, just out of curiosity, have already been through at least one Safe Sanctuary training, whether here or at another church? Okay, great. How many of you, is this your very first one? Okay, good. This is good because I like to have a mixture of people. You know, I don't know how many Safe Sanctuary trainings I have been a part of, whether it's, you know, sitting from your standpoint or standing up here leading one. But every time I do it, whether it be sitting in the crowd or giving one, I am always amazed that there's always something I am to be reminded of myself, and there's always something that I maybe not forget, but maybe need to be reminded of even more. There are going to be some difficult things that we're going to talk about today, and but we're going to try to do it in as positive of a way as we can. That's always my big goal. Is I don't want you to leave here depressed or discouraged or like, I can't believe the world we live in today. I want you to leave here knowing that you have the tools and you're empowered to lead in your church to the best of your ability. So let's go ahead and get started. If you do have any questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand or shout out or whatever. Say, hey lady, and I should be able to take care of those questions for you. So let's get started. Hang on, there's a lot of information that we're going to go through, and I'm going to fly through some of it. So of course, and I'm going to probably have technical difficulties along the way too. There we go. Okay, so populations we protect. I know that y'all all are like representing various populations that you work with. Some of you work with probably adults, and some of you work with children, with youth. But the important thing to know is that really, no matter what, we are really here to protect all individuals in the church. For those who volunteer, for those who we are working with, the children, the youth, the adults, the vulnerable adults, and we'll talk more about what that term vulnerable adult means. So we're going to be working on all those things here today that we're going to be talking about. Populations we serve, those are the individuals that maybe how we serve in the church. Our nursery workers, our children and youth workers, our leisure ministry workers, our Stephen ministry workers, hospital, homebound trustees, the people who have to take care of the building, administrative workers, all of those types. Can I take this off? Sure. Sorry. I told him I was going to stand still, but I'm not. Sorry. Here we go. That's a little bit better for me. Okay. Is that okay? Okay. So as we continue on, the reasons why we have to do safe sanctuaries. I mean, we all know that we live in a difficult world around us and that we are serving in a very difficult world. But there are many reasons why we have to do this, not just because somebody here in this church building told you to, but because it was, first of all, mandated by our General Conference in 1996 and has most recently been updated in 2008. We also, again, like I said, for the protection of those working with the various populations in the church, as well as for the protection of those individuals that we are working with. Scripture, of course, tells us that we are supposed to protect all of God's children. That is no matter what the age of the child, whether we're adults. This is one of the favorite scriptures for the Safe Sanctuary trainings. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. That's pretty powerful stuff. Saying, don't mess with my kids, basically right there. So pretty powerful stuff. One of the things that we say, we have a preschool program at our church, as I know that y'all do as well. And one of the things that we say about our preschool program is that our teachers and the rest of the church staff, we are, for some of these kids, the only representation of Jesus that these children see. We have a high percentage of our preschool students are from non-church going families. And so you never know what kind of an impact you're going to make on this child's life or individual's life way down the road. So it's very important to think of what kind of representation of Jesus am I serving. Also, we have to think about those who are adult ages, vulnerable adults, those who are elderly. Basically, respect each other. Respect your fellow volunteers. I mean, Scripture calls us to do this. And we all are very familiar with this, or your baptismal covenant. One of the things that we promise as a congregation is to say we will do everything in our power to guide this individual along the right path. And in doing so, that involves taking care of them, nurturing them, helping them grow, and protecting them. One of the things that I feel like is very important for the Safe Sanctuary program is to be able to recognize some indicators of various abuse, difficult situations that may be going on, because if we are able to be that individual who may save a child, a youth, a vulnerable adult from a difficult situation, then that's a very important thing to do. That's part of this promise that we've made when these individuals join our church. So if we put safety first, it not only it will protect us from false allegations. It will also deter predators. We're going to talk about just things that your church does and that various other churches do to make it more difficult for predators to come in. And it prevents loss of the reputation of the church, and it also prevents loss of money in terms of lawyer fees, insurance, all sorts of things that come into play. So that's why we are doing this, why we are putting safety first. So this part of the presentation is the part I'm going to try to speed you through a little bit. It's kind of I feel like you need to really know what you're looking for and know what we're talking about and understand what the numbers are around us and why we're doing this, to really remember what is going on in the world around us. So, of course, children, birth through age 12, that's physical age, okay? Your 18-year-old, may act like a child, but technically, chronologically, is not a child. Youth, age 13 to 18. A vulnerable adult is a person considered of adult age, 18 or older, and for whatever reason, they may have difficulty in making decisions for themselves, whether it be about their physical well-being, emotional well-being. They may be somebody with some type of special need, and they also may be considered elderly, which is 65 or older. So those are the populations that we're going to be talking about here today. Of course, we know there are so many different types of abuse, and there are so many types of abuse that really aren't even listed here, that we just, we have to narrow it down. Physical, emotional, sexual, ritual abuse, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, neglect, abandonment, and then financial abuse. Very quickly going through these. We've all heard of, are familiar with what physical abuse is, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse. For me, one of the most dangerous ones up here is the emotional abuse. The signs are the most difficult to notice, and you recover from bruises. It's very difficult to recover from emotional trauma. So various types of abuse, of course, sexual abuse, non-consensual sexual contact. The important thing to note about that is it's also exposure, like exposure to pornographic materials. Sexting is something that we've recently had to have talks about and deal with. That's considered sexual abuse as well, dependent upon where it's coming from. So it's amazing how from the first time I gave this presentation, sexting wasn't even a word, like it didn't exist. And that was just a few years ago, so. And then there's abandonment, which also we know is just completely not taking care of an individual. Very similar to neglect. And neglect has more to do with the endangerment of this individual by not doing certain things. Abandonment is just completely leaving this child or an elderly person. There's been a case recently where an individual, he was completely abandoned by his caretaker, and I think was alone for like 3 weeks or something like that. Just horrible situation. Financial abuse, of course, this deals more with our vulnerable adults. We're not talking about your kids, allowance or anything like that. We're talking about the vulnerable adults here. Unauthorized use of funds, property, belongings. It can be by misrepresentation, by force, by manipulation. So all those types of things. A couple of facts that this is always the portion that is a great reminder for me. Abuse often occurs in ongoing relationships. Reported victims of child sexual abuse have been infants, but incidence of abuse peaks with victims between ages 8 and 12. And part of that has to do with how kids are involved in more activities between those ages. They're around more people. There are more opportunities, unfortunately, for them to be abused. These are the scary numbers. 3 million cases of child abuse are reported each year. That's just what's reported, okay? That's over 8,000 a day, over 340 an hour, 5.7 every minute, 1 every 10 seconds. Those are the ones that are reported. That's not the number of that is actually going on. And up to 2,000 deaths occur each year. Now, these are older statistics. I haven't been able to find some, especially from Child Help USA. They usually have great statistics on these kinds of things. But these numbers have not been updated. So chances are very good that they have grown. 1 in 3 girls has been sexually abused by the age of 18, 1 in 7 boys. That's very frightening when you think of your youth group or when you think of the kids in your children's ministry area. What does that potentially mean for them? What is one of them going to have to potentially face one day? By some estimates, the actual number may be 3 times these numbers that are reported. So that's pretty frightening. That would mean 9 million potential cases of child abuse every year. They're known by, the child molester is known by the victim 80% of the time. They're generally between the ages of 20 to 30. Some of them abused before they're age 18. Many are married with children. 1 in 4 are actually friends or fellow family members of the child. Half are friends. 2 out of 3 who are caught and punished will abuse again. That's why it's so important for us to set up trainings like this and for us to set up our background checks and get to know you and all those kinds of things. It's not because you're not trusted, it's because these are what the numbers tell us. And we have to make it difficult for people to get in to the church, to be around our precious children. These are kind of frightening numbers to me as well too, because it shows the effects of it later on in life. Now, this is not, again, this is more of a correlation. This is not saying if this child is abused that they're going to end up in prison one day. That's not what it's saying. This is just that these are those types of statistics. 36% of women, 14% of men in prison were abused as children. 60% in drug rehab were abused. 30% who were abused and neglected will later abuse their own. The good thing about that, though, that I see too, is 70% will not. So somewhere along the way, somebody made a difference for that child. And it could have been somebody in their church who saw the warning signs, saw what was going on, and did something about it. We usually think of this type of a child molester or a predator, one who that's what they prefer, is to go after children. But one of the things that we don't think about is a situational, someone who just takes advantage of a particular situation. The devil works on us all the time in some way or another. And say an individual is left alone with, say you have a college kid who's volunteering with your youth group or your middle school group, and that individual happens to be left alone with another child, with a younger person. and they make a bad decision, and they do something they're not supposed to. That's what this is considered as situational. So again, it's why we build up many adults in a group with kids, with youth, so that nobody's ever alone with children. This, and you can't really see the numbers that great, this is a map from the Georgia Sex Offender Registry, and it's out-of-state sex offenders, over 3,000, in-state sex offenders, or total sex offenders, 17,514. These are the individuals who have to go and register as sex offenders. So that doesn't include those who were never caught, who were never arrested, never convicted. You know, this is just those who are on the registry. So in just this general area, there's 725. And so that's quite a large number. You can see what's Clark County, 107. Walton, we've got 129. So these are websites you need to write down. If you have children, this one, the best one is that Family Watchdog right there. If you have children, if you're looking at buying a house, this shows you how kind of, you know, I guess crazy at this point I am. When my husband and I were buying our house, I went to familywatchdog.com, typed in our address, and you can see how many registered sex offenders there are in your area, how far away they are, and everything. Type it in, type the church's address in, and you'll see how many are in the area. One time, and this goes to show you that you just never know, I have the two most precious little nephews in the whole wide world living back in South Carolina, and I guess I was updating the website, and I was trying to figure out how to get this link up and all this kind of stuff. So I typed in my sister's address out of, I guess, morbid curiosity, I don't know. Typed in my sister's address, clicked on one of the squares, and it was a boy that I grew up with that I was very, very dear friends with growing up that was now a registered sex offender. So you never know. And one of the reasons why I look on it, and it, again, you think what you may, but I look on it to see just different faces in the area. And so if we are in a downtown area like y'all are, I mean, Monroe downtown is much, much smaller, but we have foot traffic all the time. People always coming by, needing something, needing help, people, you know, asking questions about the church. And I have recognized faces off of the sex offender registry. And so it's made us super aware of who's coming in and out of our doors, especially with our preschool during the day. You know, we keep the doors locked at all times, but if somebody buzzes in and we let them into the office, I still need to know if they're a face I recognize off of that registry or not. So, I'm sorry, we're gonna like lift the spirit in just a little bit, I promise. Let's see your faces go. If I had a joke, I would tell it, but I don't. Actually, I do have a cute joke one of my kids told me yesterday. I'll tell it to you later. Okay, elder abuse information. This is very frightening to me, too. These are people who have you know, served in the community, who are, you know, retired, you know, wanting to just enjoy life, and here they are being taken care of by people who are taking advantage of them. And it's just so sad and terrible to me. Elder is anyone over 65 years. It is an increasing population, dramatically increasing. 2008, 3.9, and they're estimated that by 2025, there will be 62 million elderly. The elderly are taking over, okay? That's what's going on right now. And the reports of abuse, as you see them right here, 1 to 2 million. Of course, 67% abused are women, 32% abused are men. Part of that has to do with that women generally live longer than men do. Sorry, fellas, but that's what part of those statistics are. 53% of abusers are women, which is something we're not used to hearing. I'm not trying to criticize men, but it's not necessarily something we're used to hearing. Any ideas why the percentage is so much higher for women to be abusers? A lot of them are the caretakers, caretakers. That's not the right word. A lot of them are the caregivers. That they, you know, they're the ones who are taking care of, you know, Uncle so-and-so. There's nobody left. You're tired, you're exhausted, and you lose your temper. I mean, those are the things that happen. one of the things about that's difficult about elder abuse is just so difficult to identify, okay? Because it can be financial abuse, things go missing from the individual's house, all these different types of things happening that maybe you just think, well, they're losing their minds, or they're not, all here anymore, but it happens every day. And so it's really important for you to hear and to listen what these individuals are saying to you. You will be receiving two handouts before you leave. One is on indicators of child abuse, one's on indicators of vulnerable adult elder abuse, and it has all of these things on here. One of the things I just want to say is, one of these things, like if you've got a hostile kid, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's being physically abused. He may be a hostile child. Fearfulness of parents and or other adults. My best and greatest volunteer has a voice way louder than mine, and some kids don't like his loud voice. Very few of them, once they get to know him, they're like, oh, he's great, fantastic. But, first time, and if they're new and they're nervous, they may be a little nervous. So anyway, I'm going to breeze through some of these. Like I said before, emotional abuse is the scariest one to me. You just don't know sometimes what you're going to see. Excessively seeks adult approval, threatens or attempts suicide. I mean, we see that all the time, y'all, especially with bullying going on right now. Bullying falls into this category. Watch your kids at church. Watch your youth at church. Are they saying things that are making you worry about them? I had a super serious talk with my kids one day after a 6th grader committed suicide in our community. And I told them, I said, let me tell you something. There are 2 things you need to know right now. First of all, if somebody's doing this to you, saying things to you, you need to come to me. You need to go to your mom, and you need to go to somebody. I don't care who it is. I don't care how embarrassed you are. You need to go to somebody. Secondly, if you see somebody being treated that way, you need to do something about it. And I think that's something we all need to really take heart to, because there was a lot of kids who were confused and scared by this 6th grader committing suicide in our community. And so you've got to take action now. Neglect. Improper dress for climate. It may be 30 degrees outside, and child may come bebopping into preschool with Crocs on and no socks, and maybe a tutu on. You just never know. That morning, it may not have been worth the battle or the fight to get the warm boots on and everything else. So you have to know the individuals you're working with. You have to know the families to really be able to make good judgment calls on different things. Now, if that happened all the time, that's a little bit different. This one, indicators of sexual abuse, it's also one that frightens me quite a bit, but advanced sexual knowledge and or behavior. Kids know now more than I think I knew 3 years ago when I got married, okay? They just know so much more. It is frightening the amount of things they see on TV, the things they hear, all that kind of stuff. So, be aware of that. Also know that you never know what may have happened to. They may have walked in on something, and that has happened before to us, where kids come in and telling us the story, and then we realize what he's talking about, and we knew the family well, and we called them up, and she explained what had happened. So, again, know your families, know who you're working with. How many of you have heard of ritual abuse before? The ritual abuse is basically, the purpose of ritual abuse is to appease a higher power of some sort. In fact, the reason why Sanctuaries kind of was catapulted into motion was a case where all these great volunteers had come into this church. New members were coming in left and right. They were excited about volunteering for children's church. And if children's church for you is anything like it is for me, it's one of the most difficult things to get volunteers for. You're so excited about all these people coming in. Come to find out, during the church service, which was literally across the hall from where they had children's church, They were performing ritual, like, things on these children. It was forms of sexual abuse, emotional abuse, to appease their higher power in this cult. All these individuals who were coming in were members of a cult. And that's what was going on. So that's what kind of catapulted this all into motion. Really and truthfully, indicators of ritual abuse are pretty much the same as everything else. Because it involves all these other types of abuse. And again, we've already talked about this some. The biggest thing with financial abuse in case of elder and vulnerable adults, the first thing they'll say is that things are missing. You know, or that it seems like there's just not the same amount of money that I thought there was. Or those are the real big indicators for financial abuse. Signs that it occurred at church. One of the things that I always know to expect is that at the beginning of the school year, there are certain children I know who will lay out on the floor at the start of Sunday school. Because they're like, Mama, you left me all week, and now you're leaving me again at Sunday school, you know. And so that is not a sign that abuse occurred at church. You know, I know the kids well enough to know who's going to do it and how often it's going to occur. But things to look out for, the anxiety about Sunday school. Maybe they really enjoyed an activity but no longer want to go and they can't really explain why. Unexplained hostility toward a worker, nightmares. Maybe they don't want to be alone with a person. All things that work together. Again, one in and of itself does not indicate abuse, but it definitely is something you need to watch out for. So a lot of times people think, well, if an allegation is made, it's not, you know, it'll pass and there won't be any repercussions from it, even if just an allegation is made. And if you think that an allegation isn't as detrimental as an actual incidence of abuse in your church, you're kidding yourselves. Because anytime somebody is accused of doing something wrong, it takes a lot of time to recover. There's a lot of trust that has been lost. The life and relationship with God is altered forever for the church, for that individual who is falsely accused, for the family whose family member experienced abuse. The church is sued. It can be sued in either way. The person who is accused can sue the church for not protecting them, for not doing things like this, for not providing the appropriate number of volunteers. And for everybody involved, the trust is altered forever. This picture, and it's a very powerful picture to me, on the right, was drawn by a child during art therapy. They were asked to draw like their Sunday school class. And this is what they drew because they had been abused during their Sunday school class. So you want your children to still think of your bright, happy church and not become that church. So a couple of things, more things that will help you understand why we do this, and we'll go into a little bit of detail on other things. One of the things that we don't do enough of is screen our workers, screen our volunteers. We are called to be a very trusting people. We are called to forgive. We are called to love one another. We are never called to be naive, and we are never called to be taken advantage of. And so that's the big thing to remember. We don't know all the facts about the community. That's why I say go to that family watchdog, and that will help you understand more about your community. We provide access to children and others who maybe can't make the best judgments for themselves. We don't screen, and we don't do enough training. But this is one of the things that you're doing as a church, so you should be happy about that. You should be very glad about that. And this is, I really feel like I need to take this slide out, but it's important to know that if your church says this isn't necessary, you may not be able to get insurance as a church, especially as a Methodist church. I know that the company that we have insurance through, that they will not cover us if we do not do this. And if we do not show that we have a safe sanctuary program and that we do these trainings and things like that, because it costs a lot of money to be insured by those companies. Your church could be considered negligent if something happens here and there was not a plan in place. It can be, so it could lose quite a bit of money. And the biggest thing to me is that you don't want to become that church. And we all know that church. You know you ride by one somewhere along the way where you say, that's what, this happened there at that church. And you don't want to become that. What unfortunately is the first thing you may think of when you hear Roman Catholic Church. These cases of abuse. And that's so terrible because they've done so many great things. And unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind, there's been $2.6 billion paid to U.S. victims since 1950. That's just the U.S. There's all these cases over in Germany right now going on and in England about various Catholic priests. And so it's just terrible. That is a lot of money. The Tennessee Conference of the United Methodist Church, I don't know how many of you have heard of this case or have heard about it. There was a case settled for $3 million for 2 victims. The insurance coverage wasn't adequate enough to protect them, so they ended up losing property too. Like they lost their big conference center and their retreat center because of this. And let's not even worry about the spiritual aspects of recovery, but that's a difficult thing to recover from. One of the things that I see is all these billions of dollars being wasted on people's terrible decisions and people doing wrong things and bad things that could have been gone to ministry work and could have been gone to missions. And just what a terrible waste that is, because somewhere along the way, we didn't do a good enough job of screening our employees or our volunteers. Just a couple more cases. There's possibly as many as 5 million victims nationally of elder financial exploitation every year, but it says that only 1 in 25 cases will actually be reported. And that's really sad, because part of what that tells me is that we're not listening to our elderly. We're not listening to our vulnerable adults to be that voice for them when nobody else will be. And of course, all the things that go into, can you imagine the media coverage? The media always jumps all over the church when something goes wrong there. The trust, the disunity, years and years later, you'll hear stories about it. Just all the things, and it's just a complete spiritual crisis for all who are involved. So what you do now is what you're doing here. It's about taking the steps to really protect yourselves as workers, to protect your children, and to protect all of those who are here. A couple of things. What I did my best to do, and Robin can correct me if anything is incorrect, but I took your Safe Sanctuary policy and tried to put in the things that I thought were very important for you to know and for you to understand and realize that this is something that your church says that you have to do, that you're called to do. Of course, complete an application form, including 3 character references. These are for those who are paid staff. Who else is paid staff here? Great, good. So complete interview with the responsible church staff members, complete a criminal background check as well. All important things. Even if you've worked in churches time and time again, you need to redo this every time that you started a new church. For volunteers, many of the things are the same way. 6-month hospitality rule. That means that if you come into this church and you start visiting and then you decide to become a member, that we don't immediately say, oh, you want to volunteer for this? And it's so hard to do. As a staff member at a church, I can tell you it's so hard to do, especially when you see that person's great with a certain population. It's difficult to do. One of the things that we actually try to do is to do like a year, so we can really get to know you, can really get to understand where you would best be able to serve. So that's one of the things we do. Again, complete an application form, have references on there, an interview with a supervising staff member, and complete a criminal background check. Your character references are really important because you find out a lot. You can hear it in somebody's voice immediately when you call to ask them, so-and-so has wanted to volunteer with the church. Oh. And I've had that happen before. And I thought, well, this isn't going well. So, but just very important things to do. So a couple of operating procedures, things that you will be doing here at this church, and again, this is from your Safe Sanctuary policy. And don't think that because some of these things have to do with children and with youth, and that's not a group you work with, don't think that it doesn't apply to you. Okay? Because you never know. How many of you had to randomly step in and just watch a class real quick or watch down the hallway for something? I mean, have you ever had to do that just randomly, but you don't normally volunteer with the kids? That's why one of the things that we try to do in our church is to make 90% of our church population, our congregation, Safe Sanctuary certified, whether they volunteer on a regular basis or not. Because you never know when you just might have to be, we have an emergency, we need somebody to step in real quick and help us out here. So please listen to these. And how many of you, I'm sorry, I'm making you like raise your hands and put them down and do the hokey pokey. How many of you are parents and your children are here at this church? Okay, so these are important things for you to see too, because you need to know what needs to be happening in your child's room. And if it's not happening, don't think it's because somebody's being slack or somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do. It may be because they may need somebody else to step up and say, hey, I'd love to offer a hand, you know? If you see that happening, just say, hey, can I help out in any way? It's just a very important thing to do to support your church staff and the volunteers here. 2 adult rule, preferably at least not married individuals. Now we do have, like at our church, we do have Sunday school teachers who are married, but we always have a floater going up and down the hallway. There's always somebody knowing what's going on in those classrooms. Windowed and open doors. There needs to always be an access to a telephone. You know, cell phones are aggravating, and they're annoying, and everybody texts on them and does all that kind of stuff. But it has been a great addition for us as a ministry area because we've been able to make sure that somebody can always get in touch with me, with some of the other Sunday school teachers, with the nursery workers. It's really been a great thing for us. Children are not allowed to leave designated area without permission or supervision, okay? And I actually want to say without supervision. Because if they're a child, they don't need to be going through the church by themselves. Not even to run down the hallway to the restroom. You need to be in constant contact with that child, eyesight of that child, because you just don't know what can happen, okay? People have done crazy things to get to these children, and they'll do it again and again, and they'll come up with crazier ways to get to them. So, and it's most difficult with the kids who are the most familiar with the church, who've been here since before they were born, who, you know, have always been a part of this church. And what I tell my kids, and I have to remind them so many times, I'm so glad you're comfortable here. I'm so glad you feel like this is your home, but we still need to take care of you. And you never know what people might do to hurt you. So that's one of the things I always have to remind my kids. I hate to break their innocence in any way, but they also need to know that it's not automatically a safe place where they can run around free, because I mean, we are in the world that we are in today. Check restrooms before entering. This is one of the crazy things that people will do. Wednesday nights, our church doors are open a little bit longer. They're unlocked a little bit longer than normal. Somebody could get into those church doors, be unseen. We've got mazes through the church, it feels like sometimes. Hide in the bathroom and wait. And that has happened, not at our church, thank goodness, but that has happened at many, many churches. So you always need to check the restrooms before you enter. And if you are working with your children who are still wearing diapers, or their potty training, make sure any diapering occurs in an open area. One of the things that I tell my preschool teachers every year is if the 3-year-old has an accident, change them, you know, out in the open area of the restroom. Change them in the hallway if you have to, but just make sure that somebody else sees you and sees what you're doing. One other thing to add to that is with the help in restroom only when necessary, it is not an inappropriate question to ask a child or a new parent, how much help does your child need in the restroom? Do I need to help them any in the restroom? That should be one of your first questions you ask of a family who's visiting. If they're, you know, if they're in the 6th grade, hopefully not. But if they're, you know, in kindergarten, 4-year-olds, and you know, they may have some special needs where they may need some help too. You know, I find it very interesting that sometimes families maybe aren't always as willing to share like something difficult that may be going on. Maybe their child has just been diagnosed with autism, and I'm taking this from sort of personal experience here. And maybe there are some areas where this child needs some help. And I am telling you right now, the more welcoming you make your area that you work, the more likely those families are going to share that information with you, and the better you're going to be able to serve, and the more likely that family is going to be able to stay. So I say that so that you'll understand that if you as a family member have something that you need to share with a volunteer, trust that volunteer enough to share that information. Say, look, this is what's going on right now. We're not sure what's happening, you know, whatever, but we may need a little extra help in the restroom today, or may need a little extra help with this. So just really be aware of those things. Counseling, and this can be really with any age that you have. This can be with adults, not even considered elderly or vulnerable adults. This is with any adult. Make sure that you're always in a public place. Never meet with the opposite gender alone. And I know that's difficult sometimes, but you know what? You got to do it. You got to do it, especially as if you're an adult who's meeting with a youth. Make sure there's another adult there. My youth director and I, we work real closely together. And so if there's ever something difficult going on, lots of times we'll try to, maybe if I can't be right there, I'm right outside the door or right next door, so that we just kind of know what's going on. Make sure that if you meet a youth off campus, say, like we have Brewster's nearby. So say you're meeting this youth at Brewster's, make sure that the parents know about it, that they're informed about it and know what's going on. Meet in public place, document everything that is discussed. You can go as far as to record it if you have to, if it's a situation you're uncertain of, but document everything that's being discussed. Now, if this is, you're a volunteer and you're meeting with this individual on a regular basis, after about 2 to 3 meetings, you need to send them on somewhere else. You need to send them to a supervising staff member because it just doesn't need to become an ongoing thing for you. For one thing, that's not fair to you. You're not necessarily a licensed counselor, okay? You don't need to take on that burden. You can be of a help, and one of the ways you can be of a help is to send them to someone who can really take hold of whatever's going on and help them out with it. Parent guidelines. I feel like sometimes, and I have to tell you, I am blessed to have just a great group of parents to work with, a great church to work with, and we've been doing Safe Sanctuaries for a long time, so a lot of these things, it's you know, I've had people come to me and say, hey, do I need to redo my Safe Sanctuary training? You know, they'll remember, like, that it may be time for them to do it, and I appreciate that very much. So, but even with that said, there's sometimes I feel like I need to go, remember, this is what you need to do as a parent. You need to help me out some with some of these things. Children through 5th grade should be escorted to and from group activities by authorized parent or adult. The 13-year-old does not need to pick up the 5-year-old from VBS or from you know, whatever, Sunday school. I know that it's difficult. I know it is. But it's way more difficult to not know where both of your children are. Okay? If something happens, that's way more difficult than leaving Sunday school 2 minutes earlier so that you can pick your child up from Sunday school and make sure that they're in your hands, you know? It's difficult, and I know you trust that 13-year-old a lot. And this, again, is from personal experience, so that's why I say this. So I know you trust that 13-year-old a lot, but it's really important for them to be with an adult. I don't even like for my 5th and 6th graders, because I work with that group a lot too, I don't like for my 5th or 6th graders to say, oh, well, Mama told me to meet her there. No, Mama needs to come pick you up still, okay? Just 5th and 6th grade, you're not capable of making wise decisions always, okay? So that's how I feel about that too. Drop off in an adult supervised area. Don't drop and run. Make sure that the adult who is in charge sees your child and has your child in custody, okay, that they have them right there. Again, you don't know who could be standing on the other side of that door. You don't know what could have happened, okay? You just don't know. Don't allow children to travel through church, to run through church, all those kinds of things. If you are asked to fill out a permission form, fill it out. If you're asked to fill it out again, fill it out again. Okay? Fill out your permission forms. And if your child has to take certain prescribed medications, you should be the one who's giving it. But say if you're on a church trip and you'll have to fill out all this information to say, my child has, will need to take this at this time. And that will be given by an adult leader on the trip. But if you're there at the church with your child and, maybe they're on antibiotics this week, you need to be there to give it to them yourself too. Just a couple of things about off-site events. Drivers must be 25 years or older to transport children or youth. Okay, so just because you got the license doesn't mean you are responsible enough to take the children somewhere, okay? Not 19, not 18, not even 21, 25 years old. I like that rule a lot. 25 years old to transport children or youth. In general, youth and adults need to be separated and overnight. Like if you're staying in a hotel, there aren't going to be an adult in the same room as children or youth. But like say for instance, you go to Camp Glisten, and it's because of the way Camp Glisten is set up, there are adults in the rooms with same gender youth. And so, but there's never one adult with a group of youth, and there's never more than one adult with one youth. Does that make sense? You need to always have multiples of both in a setting. And of course, really gender separated overnight by a cement wall with barbed wire and electrical fencing, okay? That's what you need to have. I guess it was last year, we have had a great group of kids. This past year we went to confirmation, fantastic. The year before we had a great group of kids too, don't get me wrong. But we had to make a rule. You couldn't even set foot on the porch, okay? You can't set foot on the porch of the other gender's cabin. We said further away, because of course they still would want to get up on the steps. Like, no, get off. I mean, I don't even understand. You see these people all the time. So a couple of things about reporting. And this is something you may want to write down too, especially if you have anybody in your family who is being taken care of in a nursing facility or anything like that. The Department of Human Resources Division of Aging Services, this is the area that handles in general cases of elder abuse, whether you think it's another family member abusing. The Office of Regulatory Services, they handle the cases within facilities. So like an assisted living facility, a retirement home facility, whatever it may be. So that's what they have right there. And I see some of you still writing this down. Okay, here's my cute joke from a 4-year-old. How did the hamburger introduce his girlfriend? Meat patty. Precious 4-year-old told us that yesterday on our camping trip, and she was so excited about it. She was even more excited that she got it right. I'm excited that I got it right too, I had to tell you. Reporting child abuse, the Georgia law, and this is something that people are always very nervous about. If I report a case of child abuse, can that person end up suing me? What's the answer to it? No. If you make a report of child abuse in good faith, good conscience, not as a way to get back at somebody, if you make a report of child abuse that way, you cannot be held criminally or liable in a civil court for doing that. They cannot sue you for defamation of character, anything like that. So that's a really important thing to know. And to know that it's all kept anonymous, okay? That all that information is kept anonymous. Mandated reporters include child service organization personnel. If you know that a case of abuse is going on, or if a child tells you, a family member tells you, and you do not do something about it, then you can be held liable. It's a misdemeanor offense. Things to report. In our church, you need to report accidents. The reason why you need to report accidents is that so nobody can claim it as a case of abuse, okay? You need to know that so-and-so fell on on the corner of the board today and they have a gash, okay? One time we had a brother pushed his brother down into the floor, messed up his teeth. I still had to get the mama to sign up for it. I'm like, can you sign this real quick? Even though it was between brother and brother. You know, we still had to do that just to protect the families and to protect the kids and our volunteers. An incident is something that has been observed, but maybe does not need to be reported to DFACS. And an incident can be maybe a volunteer of mine has been a little too harsh with a child. Maybe raised their voices too high and got in their face too much. That I would report. I would, make documentation of it, bring that individual in, speak with them about it, ask them if there was, anything else going on, because hopefully I know that volunteer well enough to know that that's not their normal behavior. And so part of my job too, as a staff member, is to, if something occurs, to see what's going on with that volunteer, to see if there's something they need help with. Also, suspected abuse when one sees, has been told of, or suspects abuse in some sort of way. The big thing about this is that the church should have forms readily available. You should be able to go to ministry staff people and say, we had an accident, I need to fill out an accident report form. You also, various things. The other thing about it is that they should be filed as soon as possible, not a week later, not 2 weeks later. Just be, the quicker you know of something that's happened and the quicker you report it, the better. And it should only be discussed with church staff. Church staff, not church volunteers. Okay, if you're a church volunteer and you see something happen or you don't like the way somebody talks to somebody, you need to go to church staff. You don't need to go to another volunteer and tell them and talk to them, what should I do, what should I do? You just need to go to church staff member. And then that way it's taken care of, whatever needs to be done will be done, and it doesn't become gossip. Okay? The worst thing in the world for your church, for your ministry area, is to allow something to become gossip. Okay? Go to your church staff member and they will be able to help you in any way that they can. Of course, details are so very important. Incidents are handled by staff, and that's kind of what we talked about before. If a volunteer maybe is too harsh with a child, I would talk to that volunteer and try to counsel them however I can. If DFACS needs to investigate, the reporter places the call with the knowledge and support of ministry director and SPR chair. That's the way in general it's set up. Yours may be slightly different, but you as an individual wouldn't necessarily call them up by yourself and say, hey, this is what I saw happen at church today, or this is what I feel like is happening. You would need to go to that ministry staff person, to the pastor, and then talk to them about it. Here's a good question too. What if you think a child is being abused at home? Do you talk to the parents about it? Or if you think a child is being abused, period, do you talk to the parents about it? No, because that could very well be the place where the abuse is occurring. And it could mean worse things for the child. And we've heard stories about that again and again and again. So if you're concerned about a child, again, the best thing to do is to go to who? Ministry staff, right? To the pastor, to somebody who is in a position to help you make that decision of what needs to be done. Also, one thing to remember is only one person should be designated to speak to the media, and that's in ideal situations is not a staff member. It's like a lawyer or a PR rep from the church. We have an individual in our church who is a lawyer, and that person would be our individual. See, we already know that now. So that if something happens, heaven forbid, we're not scrambling around to find somebody who can speak to the media. Because if something happens in your church, first thing the media is going to do is going to be like, ooh, let's talk to some of the congregants, and let's talk to so-and-so, and let's try to find out all the scoop. And just, you don't want to get caught up in that, because that'll mean bad things for you and just lots of bad things. in the church too, if an incident happens at church, of course the DS is immediately notified as well, just because we are set up to where what happens in one church affects another church, which is a good thing. You know, we all learn from one another, we all help out each other, and so the attorney would also be immediately contacted. The way our insurance actually works at our church is if something were to happen, an attorney is arranged like immediately for both individuals in the church. So you may want to check out what your policy says about that too, just because it's a good way to kind of know, okay, this has happened, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And of course, we have to promote the greatest book ever written on this subject from Dr. Joy Melton. It's Sanctuaries for Children and Youth. She is a great resource. Do y'all know her? Does anybody know her, recognize the name? She's fantastic. She's a preacher and she's a lawyer. I mean, it's just great. And to hear, you can ask her any question. You can throw her any question about what about this situation? What should we do with this? And she will be able to come up with some sort of answer for you. If she can't do it right then and there, she'll email it to you later. So if anybody, especially those of you who are on staff, ever have any questions, there at Dunwoody Methodist is where she's at. And so you can go to Dunwoody Methodist's website and find her email address. You can email her, and she will be more than happy to help you out as staff and to figure out the best ways for you to serve here at your church. And I believe that is it. Do you have any questions through the speedy run through Safe Sanctuaries?